Welcome everybody, I'm Santiago Nieland and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. In today's episode, we're going to be continuing the podcast that we had with Derek Grimm on the story of the dispensations or the bestowals or the revelations, the times when divinity came to man and presented information to enhance and to uplift their concept and their realization of God. So just diving in our previous episodes, we explored the rise and fall of humanity's earliest divine civilizations, from the first planetary capital of Dalamatia to the mission and tragic default of Adam and Eve. But what happened after Eden? With the guiding hands of divine administration gone, civilization began to fade and truth nearly disappeared from the world. According to the Rancher book, this crisis triggered an extraordinary intervention, the sudden appearance of Machiventa Melchizedek, a mysterious teacher who appeared in ancient Salem around 1900 BC, with a simple but revolutionary message: faith is one universal God. In this episode, we explore what happened after Eden, who the Melchizedeks are, and who, not but only who, but how this emergency mission helped prepare humanity for the latter appearance of Jesus of Nazareth. So welcome, Derek. It's a pleasure, as always, to have you here in telling us these stories.
As always, happy to be back. Thanks.
Awesome, awesome. So we're going to be diving into what happened right after we left off with the banishment, which we can see wasn't a banishment, but really a decision that Adam and Eve took to leave and their eventual death. But in this segment, we see that after the default of Adam and Eve, humanity entered a long and uncertain chapter. Their descendants helped spark a remarkable civilization known as the Andites, a people remembered in legends as the mighty men of old. But without the direct guidance of divine leadership, a spiritual clarity they carried slowly faded away. In this segment, we explore what happened to the legacy of Eden and how the light of civilization nearly flickered out once again. So please tell us, Derek, what happened after Adam and Eve departed and we get this long period of time.
Yeah. So I guess we have to start this by saying that this is a part 3.
Yes, exactly. Part 3.
So we've already talked about the betrayal of our planetary civilization to the Lucifer rebellion and how that just totally took us right off the divine plan and plunged our whole planet into darkness, basically. And then Adam and Eve, faced with that isolation and that active what's the word? Resistance. Sorry, don't know where my English has gone.
No worries.
Active resistance from the planetary prince and his rebel staff. He caused Eve and then Adam to go into default, not into open rebellion. It was considered a default. And it messed up the second bestowal that we were supposed to have to uplift our civilization. And the thing about Adam and Eve was they were supposed to, not only, as we talked about in the last episode, not only were they supposed to continue on from what the planetary staff was doing and continue to uplift civilization. I think I characterized it like the second stage of a booster rocket. They were also supposed to inject their divine genetics into the human gene pool to upstep us that way as well, evolutionarily, physically. So that all went just totally sideways as well, right? And we talked about why that was a default, and it was considered a default because they lost their immortality. And they weren't here to manage an enterprise that takes thousands and thousands of years to do, right? So,
and the cause of that default, which I like, is that they didn't fulfill the will of God. They transgressed on the divine mandate, which was to not conceive outside of themselves, right?
That's right. So in contravening or going outside of the divine plan, it basically severed the circuits that were required to maintain their mortality. And we talked about that, and that's what the tree of life, the fruit of the tree of life, was for, the sustenance for that. And the mechanics of that is there's circuits, spirit, that connects them to the divine mother spirit, the universe, basically. And through that connection to spirit, they were able to maintain their immortality. But once that's severed,
Yeah.
it's finished. They're reduced to mortals, is what happened. They were divine beings that were reduced to mortals, and
Yeah.
they ended up living a long time because they were still superhumans, basically, but they died.
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are in our story, I guess,
Yeah.
from last time, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about the aftermath of what happened. The inhabitants of the garden got really upset when they found out what had happened, Eve's transgression, and they went out and they basically destroyed the tribe of the people that were involved. And then the other tribes that were in that confederation got together. They were really upset, and they decided to amass an army to march on the garden.
Yeah.
And Adam and Eve found out about this, and they decided, no, we're not going to sit here and mount a defense. We're going to leave.
Yeah.
So they left the garden, and they headed east. And they ended up founding what became the second Garden of Eden, in between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is more well known as Mesopotamia, the cradle of Occidental and Dravidian civilization.
So in a way, there's I mean, I see the connection here with the biblical account where they leave a place and go to another one. I mean, it wasn't like they were downscaling from a divine place to earth, but rather going from physically one place to another. So that's interesting. And the other point that I like about this part is that it wasn't God that banished them. It was them that decided that they did not want to face this battle. So they vacated, left, banished themselves from the garden to go to Mesopotamia, where everybody knows that it is considered where the cradle of civilization
That's right.
stems for, right?
Yeah, and we'll be talking about that in a sec. But
All right, awesome.
So you're right, though. It's the results of their actions that caused them to leave the garden.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is kind of, in the Bible, it's depicted as a fall from paradise and stuff like that. And the first garden was an actual paradise on earth. It was constructed that way. And we talked about how it was constructed. And in leaving the garden and going into this area between the two rivers, it wasn't sort of desert and arid like it is now. It was actually still not too bad, but they had to start from scratch.
Yeah,
they had to build all the buildings. They had to build a huge wall. They had to start from scratch. They had to plant crops. They had to do the irrigation. They had to do it all. And so that's what they're talking about from the Bible, leaving the garden and having to, work with the earth.
Exactly.
Like
then
that,
the sweat of their brow.
Right. Exactly. So they've transgressed and they feel absolutely terrible. They're absolutely relieved to find out that they weren't judged to be in open rebellion against the universe administration. It was just a mistake, and it's a default. And they spent the rest of their lives in this second garden location doing the best they could to make up for what they did. And I have a lot of respect for them for doing that. Just amazing, right? So one of the main things that they were here to do was to build up this huge pool of their progeny that once it I think it was 1 million people. Once it hit a population of 1 million, then they would be sent out to start blending with the indigenous races to start upstepping them, right?
Okay.
So obviously that's going to take a long time to do, and that's why they needed to be immortal and stuff, but they
Yeah.
did the best they could while they were still alive to manage and get a tradition going of building up the race as much as they could.
Yeah.
Um, so Adam lived to 530 years old, and Eve, she died 19 years before Adam.
Okay.
So both just over 500 years they spent trying to make up for their transgression and to keep things going as best they could. But the problem is that after a few generations, people begin to forget,
Yeah, exactly. We can
and
see it. Yeah.
that's why the immortality is so important, that overarching management, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but again, because of this race, it's an actual race of people, and the Urantia book is described as the violet race because Adam and Eve had
The
their
heel.
skin was kind of violet, right?
Yeah.
Um, they eventually started blending with the surrounding peoples that lived, around that area, right? And
Yeah.
that's where we have again these legends of the sons of God going into the daughters of men and creating a great people, the mighty men of renown, right?
Okay.
Renown.
Yeah.
Um, and as you mentioned in your introduction, this blended race
Hmm.
of Adam's progeny and the surrounding peoples, like the Nephilim and some of the other indigenous tribes that were in the area and stuff,
Hmm.
that mix became what is known in the Urantia book as the Andite race.
Okay.
And they are the people that a lot of these Ancient Aliens TV shows and Graham Hancock, this civilization that seems to have its footprints almost all over the world, all these
Yeah.
megalithic monuments and stuff like that are so similar all over the world.
Yeah.
That's the race that they're talking about and looking for. It's the
Okay.
Andite race. Okay.
Okay.
And they reached their apex probably around 15,000 BC-ish,
Okay.
around there. So as we sort of, as history dawns into or becomes recorded history,
Exactly.
and we have all of these civilizations that come onto the stage once we, based on the records that we have, and they're fully fledged civilizations like the Sumerians and
Hmm.
um other civilizations like that we're still finding out about. That's where it comes from. It
Okay.
comes
Okay.
from mostly this Andite race.
So
So
the stories and yeah, and I imagine that, and it's because it's not limited to that area of that geographical area, but I mean, I don't know if
no,
it's
it
these
spreads out.
stories,
Yeah,
it spreads
yeah,
out, right?
yeah. But that's where
Okay.
it starts, right? So
Okay.
there's the main center where Adam and Eve were, and then their firstborn son, not Cain or Abel, but their
Okay.
firstborn son, his name's Adam's son. He
Yeah.
actually goes a little bit further north, and he's interested in finding Van's people. We talked about Van before.
Yeah.
He was the guy who was taking care of things until
Who
Adam
set
and
up
Eve came,
everything? Yeah.
right? Yeah, he built
Yeah.
the garden and all that kind of stuff. So he had his civilization, in eastern Turkey around Lake Van and down sort of the southern shores of the Caspian Sea and into the Kopet Dag mountain range. And
Okay.
Adam's son went up there into the Kopet Dag mountain range and founded a secondary center of
Okay.
violet people. And that's really important. I don't know if we'll get into it today, but that's the source of the Greek civilization, and it's
Okay.
also the source of the Viking tradition. That
Okay.
all of their mythology, like Odin and Thor. Thor was actually a very famous general of those people.
Okay.
So it goes, all of that can be traced back to Adam's son's area, just at the
Okay. That's
bottom
interesting.
southeast corner of the Caspian Sea, that area.
Okay.
So, and then, so that happened quite early on. We're talking 37,000 years ago when all of
Mm-hmm.
these things are happening. And throughout the millennia down, they started spreading out.
Okay.
And so we've got them, into Europe. A large portion of them moved into Europe. We've got them going down into the Indus Valley. We've got them going out the Silk Road.
Okay.
They're probably the ones who created the Silk Road, um,
Okay.
out into northern China and those areas, and some of them even island hopped all the way to Peru. I think there was
Okay. Got it.
132 Andites made it to Peru.
Okay.
Wasn't Peru back then, but that area,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're talking a spread that took a long time, obviously. From the 38,000 years, you have very, very pure violet Adamites,
Mm-hmm.
Adamites, which are very pure, and then as they begin to blend, they become more and more andite as they spread out,
Yeah.
and they have this inheritance, right? So when you look at the records and you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, right?
Yeah.
Gilgamesh is actually described, his inheritance, right, is described as 2/3 God and 1/3 human.
Okay.
That's what they're talking about. He's actually 2/3 violet and 1/3 indigenous.
Yeah, and this is what we discussed as well in all of the myth, especially in the European. I mean, you look at the Greek myth. There's a
Yeah,
lot of demigods in many of the different
that's right.
religious and mythological stories. You have these, like you said, the expression. And I love it when the sons of or how do you say it? The angels of God.
The sons of God going into the daughters of men. That's a biblical
Exactly.
reference. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. So
yeah.
that's interesting that we find this is the situation where there was an actual uplifting or a different race, which it wasn't really alien, quote unquote, because it was, but it wasn't, this
Kind of. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
wasn't your local strain, let's say. But
Right.
as we're saying, this is a very interesting where we have the collision or the point of encounter of the biological cores or
Right.
evolution, and then you have the spiritual situation that uplifts that. So it's a really
That's
interesting.
right. So that is a distinction that needs to be made, I guess. So technically, I guess you could say, very technically, it is alien DNA.
Yeah,
But I prefer to view it as divine DNA.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
because
It's
I
not
think
that
that's a little bit more accurate.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It goes. It's not parallel, let's say
yeah.
in level and status, but it's a
Right,
higher in
right.
status. It's coming forth from
That's
a
right.
higher level. So let's view it
Yeah,
that way. Good.
yeah. So we do have this, like the plan was to upstep the races by blending, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to be managed and strategically done rather than just have this clump of violet race people and just have it naturally spread, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be,
There's no
yeah,
plan. As in always,
right,
you have to have a plan to execute. It's you
right.
just can't expect it to happen.
That's right. And there's no more pure violet people after a certain amount of time, and then it just dilutes.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that we're told we don't have the proper allotment of these divine genetics that every other world usually has.
Okay.
That we were supposed to have as part of the original plan, right?
Yeah. At this point
So
of our history, we would
yeah,
have this, and maybe that's one of the reasons why we see such discord and such, because we're a little bit behind. Let's say I don't want to say we're bad, but let's say that we're behind in the evolutionary path, right?
yeah. One of the things that this uplift was supposed to do was make the fight between our evolutionary and spiritual natures a lot easier.
Yeah.
So one of the ramifications of not having enough of that is that it's a lot more of a fight for us here
Yeah.
between those two natures
Yeah.
than it's supposed to be, and that it is on other planets.
Yeah, definitely. I
So
can see that.
that's just one of the things that we have to deal with now. So
All right. Awesome. So
yeah,
tell us, Derek, and let's move before we go into our next segment. So what's the situation? We've got all this point that
yeah,
we see, this combination. So before we get to what we're coming, I mean, to the
yeah,
meat on the bone of who Machiventa is,
yeah.
what's the prior situation?
So we've got this spreading out and this diluting and this amazing Andite civilization going over and doing their thing, and that's what Graham Hancock's finding and all that kind of stuff. But over the millennia, we're talking, it started 38,000 years ago. They reach an apex 15,000 years ago, and we're still diluting, right, and spreading, and the civilization is being lost. It's coming down to the level of the evolutionary civilizations,
Yeah.
right? Because there's nothing up top guiding it. And so while evolutionarily we're progressing quite well now,
Mm-hmm.
intellectually and everything, spiritually, things are really, really downsliding quickly.
Okay.
And the problem is that by the time we're jumping ahead in our story a little bit now, but the celestial administration and Melchizedek, who we're talking about today, was one of these people, knew that Jesus was coming. And he was really, really scared that by time Jesus came, the light of truth,
Mm-hmm.
the truth that there was a universal Father, would be completely distinguished on the planet. That's how
Okay.
bad it had degenerated to spiritually on the planet. And now
Okay.
we're talking this realization is about 3000 BC, I would say.
Okay.
They came to this realization.
Okay.
So
That kind of leaves it to the next
that
phase.
kind
Who
that
who
kind of
who who
yeah,
came to that realization and what happened afterwards? So this is
exactly.
very
Yeah.
interesting. So this
Yeah.
is the situation of the Earth, and stay tuned. We're going to talk about who they are and what they did. With both Dalamatia and Eden lost, the administration of Earth fell into the hands of the remarkable order of celestial beings known as the Melchizedeks. According to the ancient book, these beings served throughout the universe as teachers, administrators, and crisis managers during planetary emergencies. For thousands of years, they quietly guided humanity from behind the scenes, preserving what remained of truth while preparing the world for a turning point yet to come. So tell us a little bit more about who these beings are, which I think it's very interesting. And we see this word Melchizedek throughout different sacred texts.
There's two things I think we need to sort of talk about here
Mm-hmm.
that are going to set this up. One is a message that Adam and Eve received when they defaulted.
Okay.
And that message was actually from Michael, who we know on the planet as Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
saying, I know in your hearts that you weren't rebelling against me. You just made a mistake. I will see you. If I don't see you before, I'll see you when I come to the planet.
Okay.
And Adam and Eve are like, what? Like,
Okay.
that was a huge thing. And they
Okay.
kept that in their hearts. And from that point on, there was conjecture that
Okay.
another son of God was going to be coming to the planet, and that sort of comes down through the millennia that someone's coming, someone's coming, someone's coming, right?
Okay.
So the other thing that we have to talk about, stepping way back and looking at all the stuff that we've been talking about and all of the things that went wrong on the planet. When something goes wrong on a planet, it's usually a Melchizedek that steps in, and it's usually a
Okay.
bunch of them. Melchizedek's, I guess we could really get into the different orders of celestial beings and stuff like that, but just to make it simple,
Yeah.
Melchizedek's in our local area of the inhabited universe, they are a really, really high order. an incredibly diverse order of beings.
Okay.
Okay. They're higher than Caligastia and Lucifer, much higher. They're
What are
higher
they?
than they're Melchizedek's.
No, but Lucifer and
Oh,
the other guys.
Lucifer and Caligastia are an order of divine being called a Lenonendek.
Okay, which are more
And
administrative, right?
they are divine administrators. That's
Yeah,
what they do. They're
yeah.
amazing at it. Like that's what they're created for, right?
Okay, yeah.
Um, Melchizedek's are way, way higher than that.
Okay, got it.
And Adam and Eve, they're higher than Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve's order is called a material son and daughter, and they have a very, very specific function, usually to
Yeah,
come to the planets and do what Adam and Eve did here.
yeah.
But they also have jobs in some of the celestial spheres and stuff like that.
Okay, okay,
But um, they are so diverse in the things that they do that they're the ones who usually step in
okay,
when something goes wrong.
okay.
So when the betrayal happened here, the Lucifer rebellion happened, it was a
Mm-hmm.
group of 12 Melchizedek receivers that stepped in to take the reins of everything, to keep kind of steering it, right? And they were the
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
that were sort of helping Van do his thing while he was still on the planet. But they were
Okay,
basically in charge. And
okay.
then when Van handed the reins over to Adam and Eve, the Melchizedek said, "Okay, Adam and Eve, you guys are running things now. We're going to withdraw. Good
Yeah, you're
luck."
gonna stand away.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And they did that, and then Adam and Eve defaulted, and they had to come back.
Okay.
So after Adam and Eve defaulted, the control of planetary affairs went back into the hands of the same 12 Melchizedek receivers.
Okay.
And they provisionally guided the whole celestial administration and the affairs of government and all that kind of stuff up until the time of Jesus coming here.
Okay.
The whole
There was like
38,000 years
like an
until Jesus came.
interim government. It's like an interim
Yeah,
government with not
yeah,
necessarily in the affairs of man. That's important. I mean, because that has to take its course, and they kind of just, at a distance, just supervise that. But there is an administration of what's going to be. I see it as that when you come into a war, I mean, the other faction takes over, but you still have to have that administrative bureaucracy or organ, let's call it, that manages all the different institutions. I mean, who's going to pick up the trash? I mean, this is in a very human, material, simple way.
yeah,
But,
but yeah,
I mean, this is
but who's going
basically
to do
what's
it?
happening.
Yeah,
Yeah. Who's going to take
yeah,
care of the administration, right?
that's right. Exactly.
Okay.
So I know when people think of Melchizedek, they think that's just one guy,
Yeah.
but it's
No.
an actual high order of beings. And in our local area of the inhabited universe, our local universe, there's actually almost 10 million of them.
Okay.
So we're talking a
Quite a
lot
lot.
and diverse function. Um, there are some things that they are mostly known for. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as we progress in our universe careers after we die and things like that, we'll know them as our educators. They will be
Okay.
teaching us all the way up, all the way up to until we're standing in the presence of Jesus or Michael himself.
Yeah.
They are the educators, and
Yeah.
they
That's
have
their
the
main function.
universities, and yeah. So I guess a
And
lot of
I,
people don't realize in the afterlife. I don't consider it an afterlife. I consider it all one life. But um, there are universities, there are educational institutions, and they run them. They
yeah.
teach us. Yeah,
And then like, a lot of what you read in the Urantia book, and especially with Machiventa and the way they operate, is that they are people. I mean, they are beings that, really synthesize the process of everything. They kind of know, everything, which is very interesting. But then and they, kind of see the not see the future, but see the outcome, of how things should be. So that's how the way they, that's what I get, that's the way they kind of implant or impart, sorry, their teachings.
It's interesting that you say that, this sort of precognition thing, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a line in the Urantia book that really, really gets me. And
Mm-hmm.
it's about Melchizedek when he's talking with Abraham. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll be getting to Abraham in a minute, but um he says, he actually talks to Abraham, and this is where he's making the covenant with Abraham
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is talked about in the Bible. And he makes this covenant with Abraham, and then he tells Abraham about um, the repopulation of Canaan, of Abraham's descendants after they leave Egypt.
Okay.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah. That's
Like,
that's that's
how
what
does
I'm
he know
saying.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
right?
I don't know. I don't think it's because, and I mean, we've speculated about this. And the other day I had a podcast with Susan Lyon, and with, about how the realms of, foresight. It's in the spirit world, but maybe what how they work is that they have such a structured, and their operative mind. It's like the movements in chess, that you can project as
Yeah,
many, movement. And you like this, you like martial arts. A lot of what the code of the Bushido is, how far you can project your thought
yeah.
into the future,
Anticipate,
into the
right?
movement,
Yeah,
anticipate.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I like that. I really like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's still crazy when you think about it. He's talking about something that happens like 300 years later, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it brings up a whole bunch of philosophical questions, like, is the future determined, and there's nothing we can do? Like, we're talking about fate and predestination and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff, which is probably not the topic of this
No, well,
particular
but
podcast.
actually, we're
But
gonna be talking about this later, and we were actually just talking about this. But there is a structure, and that's what I believe. It's not that it's predestined, but there is a pattern, a structural pattern
yeah,
that, if you can understand. It doesn't
yeah,
have the conclusions of it, but
yeah,
that if you're building a 10-story building, you kind of know where it's gonna be and how it's gonna look like. Maybe not the
yeah.
details of how it's gonna be furnished inside,
Sure.
but
Yeah, that's a really good
well,
way of looking at it. Yeah, the
but
structure's
let's.
there, but yeah, the
Yeah,
decorate.
exactly.
Anyway, so we just went on a
Coming
huge
coming
tangent,
back
but
to
yeah.
the
So we're
Melchizedeks.
we're talking about the diverse function of the Melchizedek. So first of all, they're educators. That's what they're known for. Like, as we're
Yeah.
advancing, right? They're also known widely as advisors and counselors
Mm-hmm.
to all kinds of different orders above them and below them, because they just know everything. They've got their fingers in all the pies of the local universe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and as we talked about, they're also known as the emergency sons, the emergency sons of God, the emergency administrators. So in times of emergency, like I said, like a planetary rebellion,
Yeah.
are there lots of planetary rebellions? We've been told that there's been 3 in our local universe.
From
So,
how? I mean, let's get the
yeah.
percentage, or more or less, from how many to just 3. How much? How much?
Well, it's hard to measure, because it's hard to measure. Like, how do you measure how many rebellions compared to what, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
yeah.
I thought we could, but anyways, go
I'm
ahead.
I'm not I'm not sure if you can. Like, you'd have to know how many rebellions happened in other local
Yeah.
universes or areas, and I don't know if we've ever been told that.
No.
We have been told that these emergency bestowals, like what Melchizedek is about to do, his is only one of 7 that has ever happened in our local universe.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen very often, but when something does happen, it's a Melchizedek or a group of Melchizedeks that step in to take the reins.
Yeah.
So
That's part of
that's
the function, the
that's
emergency
what they do. Yeah.
administration. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
So.
again, when the Lucifer Rebellion happened, it was this group of 12 that stepped in to take over. They ran things till Adam and Eve came along. They tried to hand it over to Adam and Eve. They got about 120-year break, and then they had to come back. And in our story, basically, we're at about 3000 BC, and they're realizing, they know by this time that Jesus is coming, that Michael is going to bestow himself as the third in the series of upsteps, right? But this is an actual special one that we'll be talking a lot more about next time.
Yeah.
But they know he's coming, and they're freaking out, right?
Because everything's going to be a mess.
Well, because this light of truth is really just a barely glowing ember now, and they want to have something for him to work with, right?
Yeah.
So you've got these 12, and they're wondering what they're going to do, and they're talking about it, and it's one of these 12, and his name is Machiventa. He volunteers to bestow himself in what's called an emergency bestowal, and that's the thing that's only happened 7 times. His is one of 7 times it's only ever happened in our local universe, of up to 10 million worlds, right? So doesn't happen a lot, but Machiventa Melchizedek volunteered to do this. So he's really kind of distinguished himself from the order by doing that, right? So so now, jumping way ahead, we'll talk about Melchizedek's actual mission in the next one.
We're gonna be jumping in there, but just to sum up who they are.
Yeah. So now that Jesus has done his bestowal, things are changed again. Machiventa Melchizedek has actually been named Vice Regent Planetary Prince of our planet. So he's basically taken the title that Caligastia, the fallen prince, had, and he's been given that. It's the actual title is owned by Jesus / Michael, right? But the vice regent, the one who's actually doing it in the name of Jesus, is Machiventa. So he's still very, very much involved. The group of 12 is no longer here. Machiventa is still here.
So this is important to know, because this happened afterwards. I mean, after he came, after Jesus came, so they had this organizational structure set up this way, right?
And we'll find out why he's so distinguished and stuff like that. But so he, as Vice Regent Planetary Prince, he also sits on a council of 24 elders who basically direct the affairs of our planet. So this is way different than anything it's like not normal on any other planet. This is specifically made for our planet because we're so messed up. But we've got this council of 24 elders, and these elders are people from Urantian history who have distinguished themselves, advanced the light of, like we're talking about, the light of truth, the light of God on the planet during their lives on the planet, and have had an epochal impact, a global or racial impact on the planet.
So our history is there.
Yeah. There are representatives from each of the 6 indigenous races. I think the oldest one, and I'm totally going to mess up his name, but it's Onomanolonton. Actually, that was pretty good.
Good.
He's like upwards of 800,000 years old. So he's one of these guys that's on the council. Other notable people would be Adam and Eve, Melchizedek, John the Baptist, and a bunch of other people that the Urantia book tells us about that aren't as commonly known in terms of their names.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Machiventa Melchizedek is still very, very much involved in Urantian affairs, and he's got this special position, that he's sitting in the seat of the planetary prince in the name of Michael, in the name of
Okay.
Jesus. So that's kind of where things are sitting right now.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we covered what the Melchizedeks are and who
Yeah.
Machiventa is, and I think
Yeah.
the next part is going to tell us what exactly how we see him and what exactly he did here. So
Yeah.
this is
Exactly.
that's going to be interesting. So stick around. We're gonna jump right in. Around 1900 BC, the Melchizedeks made a bold decision. One of them would appear physically on earth to reignite the fading light of spiritual truth. That being was Machiventa Melchizedek, remembered in ancient tradition as a mysterious priest king of Salem. This message was revolutionary for its time. The entrance in the kingdom of God came not through sacrifice or ritual, but through simple faith. In this segment, we explore how his teachings shaped the spiritual foundations that will later prepare the world for the life and mission of Jesus of Nazareth. So, Derek, tell us of what happened afterwards once they decided and Machiventa came down here.
Yeah. So, as you said, I think we stopped at about 3000 BC. They were getting worried.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few problems, right? As we talked about, the light of truth was fizzling out. They knew that Michael's bestowal was coming. They didn't know exactly when, but they knew that they had to do something to prepare for it, right? They needed to set up some sort of foundation that he could build on.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, they still had to contend with Caligastia and all of his crew running around trying to mess things up, because they were still all here.
Yeah, and
Right.
the whole point is to create chaos. That's their intention,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And you can see, especially with the example of Adam and Eve, he was pretty wily and cunning and was willing to try and mess things up any possible way that he could.
Yeah.
So, as you said, they're sitting there waiting. They're not exactly sure when Jesus is going to come, but they know he is. And they chose to do the best thing that they could under the circumstances, which was to have one of them volunteer to physically incarnate
Mm-hmm.
and do what's called an emergency bestowal. And it's called an emergency because it's not part of the usual
Yeah,
plan.
it's not the sequence of evolution
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the parameters of this kind of bestowal are really, really limited, right? So basically what he was here to do was to reignite that light of truth
Mm-hmm.
and to try and build some sort of foundation for when Jesus came. That's all he
Kind
was
of
here to do.
kind
Yeah.
of sets things straight because and this is I like how you summed this up in last episode where once Adam and Eve died, there wasn't any administrative people
Right.
beings that would kind of point us in or give us a compass. It was a long
Right.
period of time where we had to have contend with what we knew before. So what happens, in all that period that you lose sight or the focus
Yeah.
on what it is. So you have to kind of correct everything because, I mean,
Yeah.
I imagine, and there's a movie, I don't know if it was, I don't know, I want to get your opinion. I don't know if you remember Noah or like the old biblical stories. If you see the movies, I mean, a lot of the tribes and a lot of how the time is depicted is very violent and very savage. It's a human sacrifices and human,
Yeah.
you know. But anyways,
That's a really good point that you made that we're going to actually be talking about.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting, kind of put the context because we kind of talk about the Bible and we see Abraham and Melchizedek, at the same point as Jesus. No. This is already the Roman administration, so they're pretty civil in what can be said about the ancient world. But
Yeah.
back in that day, it was very, very savagery. A lot of
It
savagery. But
was. And that's part of the reason that he came, was things were
yeah,
degenerating, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So please
Yeah.
continue.
So Yeah, so basically he incarnated. The actual date is 1973 years before Jesus was born,
Okay. Okay.
is the date that they give us. And he wasn't born as a baby or anything like that, just came as a person. And there's no glorious flashes of light or anything like that. He just appeared and walked into a guy's tent and said, "Hi, I'm Melchizedek, the priest of the Most Highs." And the
Okay.
guy's sitting there going,
All
"Really?
right. Okay.
Tell me
Yeah.
more. You want to stay for
That
dinner?"
yeah,
Yeah,
that would be interesting, the
right?
conversation. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he basically incarnates in the area of, well, we all know he was called the Sage of Salem.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically set up camp in Salem, which is now Jerusalem, right?
Okay.
And he, yeah, so he wasn't like a superhuman sort of person like that. He didn't need, there was no tree of life. It
Yeah,
had
he was
been
a
burnt.
more of a regular Joe, right?
He was just given a body, and he was only there for a short period. He only stayed for 90 years, actually. He was there for
Yeah,
90
the
years, which is,
regular
yeah,
standards.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but he appeared as like an adult, and he left as an adult and stuff like that. So he just appeared. But this is
Okay.
why the biblical record of him is remembers him as having had no mother or father.
Okay.
That's actually how they describe him, as
Okay.
having had no mother or father. And
Okay.
I think it's pretty extraordinary that they even remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Which is
yeah,
so clear who he
that's why.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of confusion about who he actually was and everything, and a lot of the records of Melchizedek and who he was were, uh, well, that's another story, but they were basically destroyed at a certain point, or manipulated to tell a different story
Okay.
to elevate Abraham
Okay.
as the father of monotheism and Judaism. But
Okay.
that's like a story we probably won't be able to get into right now.
All right.
But again, first and foremost, he wasn't here to upstep civilization. He wasn't here to, biologically uplift the planet or anything like that. He was here to reignite the light
Mm-hmm.
of truth and prepare the way for Jesus. And that's
Okay.
that's that's all he was here for, and that's all he did. But he did it
Okay.
really well, uh,
Okay.
because, as we know, um, well, it's attributed to Abraham, but Abraham is the father of all of the Abrahamic religions, the monotheistic
Yeah.
religions, right?
Yeah.
It's actually
Exactly.
Melchizedek who did all of that.
Yeah, exactly. He's
My,
and we're gonna see in a minute, but he's the one. I
yeah,
mean, he was one of our students, so that's where it all came from, right?
that's right. Yeah. So he sets up in Salem, Jerusalem,
Mm-hmm.
and he starts teaching. And
Okay.
within a few years, he's starting to attract a lot of followers and students. And he set up a school, and he
Okay.
started training missionaries.
Okay.
And he he really didn't have to teach them a lot. It was very, very basic what he was teaching them. And what he taught them was, like, they kind of had a bit of a creed.
Yeah.
And the creed was, "I believe in El Elyon, the Most High God, the only universal Father and Creator of all things." That's
Mm-hmm.
the first thing. Second thing, "I accept the Melchizedek covenant with the Most Highs, which bestows the favor of God on my faith, not on sacrifices and burnt offerings." And we'll be talking about that more in a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. That's it. That's important.
And third one is, "I promise to obey the 7 commandments." He had 7 commandments instead of 10.
Okay.
Moses built on those. Excuse me. Um, so yeah, seven commandments for Melchizedek, and Moses built on that tradition and
Okay.
gave 10. And that was it. That's all he taught. So,
Okay.
again, it's just we're building a foundation here, right?
And this is
Um,
important because I think, and we're going to go dive into it. It's important what this is where the covenant with of God and Abraham comes from, right?
yes, yes,
So this is important to know where all
yeah.
this comes from. Yeah.
And this teaching is the source of all of the similarities we find in the world religions. This golden rule,
Mm.
underlying golden rule sort of mentality, that finds its origin in Melchizedek and his teaching.
Okay,
The
that's
from
interesting.
It's called the Salem schools or the Salem missionaries, and
Okay.
over this 90-year period, he's teaching all of these people, and he's sending them out.
So yeah, you're
And
seeding and you're different ways throughout all these, I mean,
right,
generations, because in 90 years, you probably have like 3 generations at least there,
yeah,
3 or 4
yeah,
generations going out,
yeah.
you know?
And it's largely through the work of these missionaries in this school that he set up that this foundation was able to survive down through 2000-ish years until Jesus was born
Okay.
and came and
Okay.
took up that. So this is kind of what his plan was. Okay, so his vision for Abraham, right? Abraham's
And yeah,
comes into this. So
yeah, this is important that you make the tie and tell us who Abraham is and
yeah,
why he's
so
such the favorite teacher's favorite pet, let's say.
kind of right, but
Yeah.
he was actually chosen while his father was chosen. They were watching his bloodline before Machiventa incarnated because
Okay.
they could see that within a generation or two, someone with Abraham's qualities was going to be born.
Okay.
And so when Melchizedek incarnated, he got Abraham's father, I can't remember his name, but he got the whole family to come over. He invited them to come over. Instead, they went up and they stayed in Haran for a long time. And Melchizedek's like, well, come on. And so he extends an invitation for them to come down. And he basically knew Abraham was going to be born, and he was kind of targeting him
Yeah, this is interesting
because
of what you're
yeah,
saying and what we were talking about, the foresight and that ability to
the
see,
foresight again, the
Yeah.
foresight. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So it was he could see Abraham's potential, but it took a long time for Abraham to really come around and give up all of his own personal ambitions.
and that's part of the biblical story of what Abraham already had and
Yeah,
what he had to give up. So that's really part of
yeah,
the foundational stories about who
yeah,
we have to become and
yeah.
transition to get close to God. So it's also a
That's
very important archetype in who we want to become, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. So it actually took to the point where it took Melchizedek sitting Abraham down and offering him this covenant to
Hmm.
have Abraham finally give up all of his ambitions. He wanted to be a king. He wanted to set himself
Yeah.
up as kind of a king, right? And he like had this huge army and leaders, and he was going to set up this city, and he totally was able to do it. He was really well respected and a great leader. It took he had to give up a lot
Yeah.
for to do what he totally believed in what Melchizedek was teaching him. It just took him a lot to give up all of his
Yeah,
earthly ambitions, right?
and this is interesting because you might please reflect on this, and if whom is watching is how many times, I mean, you presented and with a lot of the bountiful, but then you have an anchor, and that's why I think what's the word, that when you do without your material possessions, when you don't have that dependency and when you're free of them, then you were able to pursue these higher
Yeah,
objectives or ideals. So it's important to not to anchor yourself on
Yeah.
on the material objects, or not even objects, situations. I
Yep.
know that many times, you have to have that job because it's going to pay for your living, but you don't know that once you go beyond that, you might be
Yeah.
able to get something even better. That's going to be you're going to be in a much better situation. But it's that fear that you're anchored, that you
Yep.
have to let go. So just wanted to get
Yeah.
that disclaimer in. But
That's
please
that's
continue.
really important.
Yeah.
And it was actually the covenant, as I said, that turned Abraham around, right? It's Melchizedek saying, you give up these ambitions of yours, and your descendants will number greater than the stars.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is
All right.
important. And the covenant is important because this is something very special for us because of our
Yeah.
condition, right? So please
Right.
let us know.
And so in his saying that, he's sort of telling Abraham kind of what his overarching plan for Abraham's descendants was going to be, right? So they actually had a plan for Abraham's descendants, and that was they were going to become a race of spiritual teachers to serve the whole planet.
Okay.
They were going to take Melchizedek's teachings, and then when Jesus came along, it was going to be upstepped. That was part of the foundation, this race of spiritual people and teachers, and they were going to be consecrated, and they were going to be sent out by Jesus as and they were going to be these guides and teachers for the whole planet, which is like just something to imagine. That would have been pretty amazing, right?
Which
And that
to
was
an
part of this
extent did
foundation.
happen.
Sorta,
It did
kinda.
happen, but not,
Yeah.
yeah, but
But
not in the way or
things
the
happened.
intention they planned. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is going to be interesting. That's going to be next. But I mean, before we get to the
Yeah.
next one, just
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about
So
Abraham
so
and
that's
Melchizedek.
that's what Abraham's descendants were chosen for. They were
Okay.
supposed to become these spiritual teachers and guides for the planet,
Okay.
right? Who
Yeah.
Jesus was supposed to concentrate and send out and further train and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So now we get to this covenant, right? And so Machiventa sits down and says, your descendants, if you give all this up, your descendants will number, more than the stars and all that kind of stuff. But the most important thing was representatively, he as representing divinity and Abraham as representing humanity, he made a covenant with our whole planet. Divinity made a covenant with our whole planet that said God agrees to do everything. All we need to do is believe his promises and follow the teachings of those sons that he sends. And that
This
is
is very
not
interesting.
something that on normal worlds, a lot more is required, because
Yeah.
we know we on those other worlds, you have the planetary prince, you have all of the teachings, you have all of the
There's
knowledge
a
of the
structure.
cosmos and the
Yeah.
cosmology. You understand what you're supposed to be doing spiritually. There's a choice that needs to be made, things like this, right? All of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is known on the planet. We have no idea what we're supposed to be doing here. And
Yeah.
so it's a special Urantian covenant, a covenant with the people of this planet, that all we have to do is believe. That's the only
Okay.
thing we have to do.
This is very
And that's
important.
super important.
Yeah.
And that is why, in my mind, that is the most important thing to take out of the whole Melchizedek story.
Yeah, which is,
Yeah,
I think this is another podcast to go into all the details of what he did, but
kind of, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
so that for them back then, 2,000 years before Jesus, was, and you touched on this, because civilization has really degenerated, right? They're like
yeah,
really violent, and they're killing people, and
yeah,
their religious practices revolved around currying the favor of God through deeds and sacrifice, blood
yeah.
sacrifice. And he's sitting there and he's saying, no, you don't need to do any of that stuff. You need to believe what God's God's messengers are telling you.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
Yeah. Very
You
simple.
just, you got to believe. That's
Yeah.
all. And that is something that even now, so many people on our planet have so much trouble accepting that that's all you have to do. You just have to have this total belief.
And that's, I think, the particular thing that we have here, that we have to believe without seeing, and the greatest thing about the faith that we have here. But once you understand it, once you know that becomes, I'd like to say a habit, but once you have that certainty, of even if it's something really crazy, but that if your intention, and that's very important, if your intention is in the right place and you want good for you and the rest of who's around you, most likely things are going to be falling, and not in the way that you're expecting it, but in a very much better and wiser way. I've come to understand and have that experience.
Yeah. I think maybe a lot of people have trouble with it because it just feels too easy. It's
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? That's all I got to do? But you know how hard it is to really believe?
And especially at the backdrop that we have today with all the situation, all this material world and the
Yeah,
secular situation. I mean, I see a lot of people being lost in unreason because, I
yeah,
mean, since there's not a straight, a totem pole
yeah.
that you can align to. There's nothing, and the
That's
people
right.
just
We're in a special situation where, as compared with the inhabited planets who have those physical manifestations of the divine government standing there that you can see, we are required to believe without seeing,
yeah,
without
yeah,
having that proof.
yeah,
And that's probably what's so difficult about it, even though it sounds so easy,
yeah, yeah,
you know? Yeah.
yeah. But it's always
So,
very important to have that spiritual receptivity. But
yeah.
yeah, please continue.
So that's the most important parts of what Melchizedek did here, and that's what, as we said, convinced Abraham to drop everything, and he basically took up control, not control, but he became the administrator of the Salem schools of the Salem
Yeah.
city. It was an actual city. There was at they say that there was, like, they had a tithing system so that they could support all of the missionaries and stuff.
Okay.
Um, they had up to 100,000 people in that
Really?
city paying tithes. So that's not even counting all the people who weren't. There was apparently 100,000 people at the height of this when Melchizedek and Abraham were still both there. That's a lot of people.
It's interesting how this is, how the story of Abraham is where we kick off basically the story of modern. I don't want to say modern, but what we know about Judaism
Recorded.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
recorded. Not just this creation myth, but now we have something that is really happening with the people, with, like you're saying, a community, with the descendants, as it was pointed out. So it's really interesting, all this and how, our history, once you look at it in a global way, in a more round way, not just with what we have with the information, when you bring in, it's like, those, those movies or those books where you start getting little bits and pieces, but once you start getting the full picture, you understand everything that's happening
Yeah.
around. So I really
Yeah.
like these podcasts that we're doing. And this is just the segue into what the fourth revelation is going to be, which is Jesus,
Yeah.
and we're going
Yeah.
to go dive into that. So before we leave, anything else that we want to stress about Melchizedek?
Well, there's a few things, I guess, that we can
Okay.
use to sort of land on, but I guess one of the questions is, did it work?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah. And I think when you look at it, I mean, we do have what are called the Abrahamic religions, right? We have
Yeah.
that foundational monotheism
Mm-hmm.
across a lot of the world religions that are wrongly attributed, well, sort of wrongly attributed to Abraham, but that it comes from Melchizedek.
Yeah.
So in that regard, totally worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Um, it kind of this vision that he had of Abraham's descendants becoming this race of spiritual people that would go around the world and uplift everybody. I don't know how much that really worked, and you have to ask, well, what happened?
Yeah.
And for the most part, I'm going to say Caligastia happened. He messed it up. He had 2,000 years to manipulate and distort this,
which is what always happens. He is always
it's what
his hands.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got his hands
And
in everything.
so by time Jesus comes, basically the Salem teachings are all twisted and distorted into this nationalistic, institutionalized, frozen and unwielding religion that ended up rejecting Jesus.
Exactly.
We're totally
Rejecting
jumping ahead now. So,
and crucifying him in the end.
Yeah. I still kind of feel like you can't say that it was a failure, though.
No,
And I think,
because the bases were there.
Yeah. And I think in terms of final thoughts, Melchizedek's mission and his bestowal really, it sits there as a turning point for us. Up until Melchizedek, everything was just a total disaster. The planetary prince, he betrayed the planet and went into rebellion. Adam and Eve, they failed, they defaulted. Melchizedek came along and it stuck. Not totally completely the way he was hoping, but it stuck enough that when Jesus came along, yes. And we've still got the traditions from that still. So that's kind of rock bottom, right? 3000 BC is kind of rock bottom, and then when he comes along, it starts building again. And we'll see how it builds in the next few podcasts and stuff. So, yeah.
Awesome. So
it's not a V though.
No,
we're not looking at a V, because
as long as there's a human factor, I don't think we can ever call it a V. I mean, it's a progress in the timeline. So I mean, this is great.
Well, we have to remember that for the past 200,000 years, except until Melchizedek, right? So 200,000-ish years, Caligastia has been pretty much free here to do whatever he wants, to mold civilization in the way that he wants. And I feel like a lot of our civilization, the virtues that we celebrate, the things that really we put on a pedestal, are backwards.
Okay.
Because we celebrate our CEOs and all of this kind of stuff, right? This business mentality, and the people who are rising to the top in our society right now, the cream, they're psychopathic.
Yeah, their motives are not aligned.
To become a politician, I know we're getting a little freaky here, but to become a politician, to become a CEO, in society today, you got to have you got to have a little bit of narcissism, psychopathy, probably a little sociopathy. Those are the things that are put on a pedestal, these virtues, and everybody looks at them. Oh my God, these people are great. I think it's all backwards.
Definitely.
And I think that's why I said it's not a V. I mean, we got a crash all the way down to Melchizedek, and now it's more of a badly shaped L.
No, definitely.
So yeah.
So yeah, and I think this is good to later talk about the situation, and what you just mentioned on the situation, the virtues that we, or the what we give virtue to. I mean, it's important so that we can realign.
It's a time of realignment right now, which we'll talk about in another podcast as well, I'm sure. But
definitely a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But it was a pleasure, Derek, up to this point that we got to basically the beginning of the Abrahamic traditions and what we're going to be seeing in the next podcast, which is going to be the life and teachings of Jesus. So thank you for being here. It's always been a pleasure.
Me too. I can't wait until the next one. Thanks so much for having
Awesome.
me. Yeah.
Awesome. And to all our subscribers, just remember that we're here every week, so you don't even have to put the remind me every day. You're going to have a new video, basically. And if you liked what we said, be sure to share it with other people that might find something interesting in what we said. So till next time, I'm Santiago Nilan. This is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.